Okay, so I've been working on an idea which was inspired by a question in the Facebook community for Elementor. I did a very rough idea for the author, and I've expanded on that. So I just wanted to make this demonstration of how I answered that question. And the question was, how do we get colors of items like text, images, all that sort of stuff to change when you scroll the page. So here's a demonstration. I've got a white theme, so I've got a white logo up here, got some white text up there, and I've called that the theme light. As I scroll, what you'll see is the top of this section here, when it gets within, I think I've got it set to 120 pixels of the top, it changes the theme to theme dark. You can see theme dark. So now I've got a black icon and black text here. When this red trigger here gets within 120 pixels, it changes the theme to red. When the white gets in within 120 pixels, it changes to white. Once again with the black. And then this one down here, I've got that set to a red theme. When that gets within 120 pixels, changes the theme to red. So this is the cool effect as you scroll where things change. And I've just chucked these, and these are actually just spacer widgets. I've chucked these in just to show that you can actually trigger this from any widget. So let's get to the nitty-gritty of how this actually works. So what I've done over here is I've created a very simple layout where I've got a dummy header. So I've just got the page settings on here to Elementor Canvas because I just want to play with a header on this page. So in that dummy header, we've got it set to a fixed position with a width 100% and z-index of 99, just to emulate a standard transparent header. I've then got a section here I've just called dark section, which is this first section with the background. Got a light section, which is this section here. Got another dark section, which actually I probably should rename that to red. Call it red trigger. And then I've just got some HTML, which I'll work through for how this actually works. So first of all, let's look at each of these sections. So I'm going to look at the dark section. And all I'm doing on this section is just a background image, typical standard sort of a section. Only difference in here is in the attributes, I'm adding an attribute called data-theme, then pipe, and then a theme that I want to call it. What's going to happen is that when this section gets within the top of the page, it's going to add this to the body tag on the page, which we then target with CSS. So I'll show you that as we work through it. So we've got the dark section, light section. Again, all we're doing on here is taking an attribute for data theme to, in this case, WPG theme dark. Just a note here, I always prefix any classes that I create with WPG. That's just my prefix. You can make whatever prefix you like that suits you, but everything should always be prefixed to avoid clashes with other classes from other themes or plugins, etc. And then I've got the red section here, which is, if we go down to the attributes, again, it's just data theme is WPG theme red. So before I show you the actual JavaScript, what I want you to see is what actually happens on the page. So I'm going to bring up my dev tools here and go to the elements and have a look at the body tag here. At the moment, the body tag has WPG theme light on it. As I scroll, now it's changed to red. Now I've got WPG theme red on the body tag. That's on white, I've got WPG theme light. On black, I've got WPG theme dark. Get to red, I've got WPG theme. So what it's actually doing is just adding a body class for whatever we set this data theme to. So that gives us a lot of power. We can use that by targeting with CSS. We could target body, WPG theme red, and then any element on this page and treat it differently because we've got that class on the body tag. When that changes to anything else, and you can make these up yourself. You just put in whatever you want that to be. Like if I change that last one to blue, which I don't have a class for, I'm going to show you this. If I update it to blue, so that's on this section at the bottom here. Do an F5, Control F5, watch that body tag. Now if I scroll to the bottom, what it's done is it's put the WPG theme blue on there. Now I don't have any classes for that, which is why this is all messed up here. So I'll put that back to red. So you can make this up to whatever you want. Whatever works for you. Okay, so before we get into the JavaScript, we'll look at how does this actually apply. So I'm going to look at my dummy header, and what I'm going to do is just comment out the CSS that I've put here. So you can see what I've done here is I've added all the different elements I want. So I've got a white logo, black, red, got white text, black text, white text, and red text. Now each of these, if I have a look at that, I'm adding class WPG theme light. I'm just using the same class names. With this one, I'm add WPG theme dark. This one, WPG theme red. The same with these heading widgets. So basically putting that class on there. Back over here in the CSS, this is where it gets tricky. So what this does is it targets the body tag when it's got the WPG theme dark, and then whatever the select the CSS class that's created for this header element, this section element. Then we go for an Elementor element that's got a class starting with WPG theme. The reason I do this is because columns and some other layout classes in Elementor also have the Elementor element class, and we don't want to hide them. So I'm specifically looking for elements that have a class starting with WPG theme. So that might be this dark section, which I'll go back to. And then I say, and it has not got WP theme dark. So when I'm applying the dark theme, anything that doesn't have the WPG theme dark, hide it. Same with this, when I've got the body class of WPG theme light, every Elementor element that has under this selector, which is the section, that has a class starting with WPG theme, but it is not WPG theme light, hide that as well. So that's pretty much how I'm hiding these things. You could target these however you like. All that matters is that we've added these classes to the body tag, which means you can then create your own CSS selectors, do whatever you want when those classes are added. So that's the CSS side of it. Now, this is where it gets a little bit tricky. So the HTML box here, which has got my JavaScript in it. Now, I put the JavaScript in here because I want to be able to edit it within this UI. What I would probably do is pull this out, stick it into custom code rather than have it on this page in HTML widget. But for now, this suits us. So effectively what we're doing is we're using a closure, and the closures in JavaScript are so that we have our own scope, so we don't have to worry about clashes with variable names, etc., theme names, function names, all that sort of stuff. So by having it in this closure, we've created a internal scope here. So I'm setting my trigger offset to 120. So remember I was talking about here when this top of this section, when you were scrolling up the screen, when that gets within, in this case, 120 pixels of the top. If I wanted it to trigger earlier, I can make that large. If I wanted to trigger later, I can make that smaller. 120 works well for me for this header. So play with that depending on what you're doing. So the 120 is the offset. Set the default theme class because what I want to do is I want it to tell it to hide all of these elements that aren't the current theme as soon as the document is ready. Otherwise, I'm going to see a flash of all of the elements, and then they'll get hidden when the theme gets applied. So I then create a function using the new ES6 syntax. I create a function called setTheme, where it's going to remove all the classes off the body that have our class list, which I'm going to talk about a little bit later, and then add the class for the theme that we're currently selecting. We've got a little function here to find all of the elements on the page that have a data theme attribute. So whatever it is, data theme, whatever the value is. Okay, so that can be anything. It can be a spacer, it can be a image, it can be a section, a column, anything you like. As long as it's got the attribute data theme, and then we put the theme name on here we want to apply to the body class. And it's going to track those every time we scroll. Now what it then does is it goes through all of the elements that we've added a data theme attribute to, and it creates a class list here. So we've got a list of all of the class names that we've added through that attributes, so that when we want to change the class, we can just remove all of those classes and then just add the one we want. Hopefully that makes sense. A little bit of a note here. So one of the things I found initially when I did this was it worked well when I was scrolling up, but not when I was scrolling back. So what I had to figure it out is a way. So when it's scrolling up the screen, it's looking at the top of the section. So in this case, the top of the section there. When it's scrolling the other way, when it's scrolling down, it looks at the bottom of the section, see where that is. So I'm up here, as that red, for example, it's close to the center, close to the top of the screen, then change the theme. So yeah, so that's what that's all about. So there's a little note here that talks about that. So this is going to process all of these elements, so all the ones that we found through the through this get trigger sections. Process all of those. It'll look for what is their current scroll position compared to the last scroll position, and work out, are we scrolling up or are we scrolling down? We then work out from the position of the top of the element minus the scroll position, and the bottom position is basically that plus the outer height of the element. So we can compare the bottom part of that on the way down. So then on the direction of up, if the bottom of the element, so in this case, if the bottom of this black, for example, is within that section at the top there, then grab the theme from that element and set the theme to that. If the scrolling is the opposite direction, so we're scrolling down, look at the top. So if we're going from here, we're going this way, look at the top of that and set the theme based on on that element. Okay, this is where JavaScript gets a little bit tricky with when you stick it into an HTML widget. Because jQuery isn't loaded, when we have this script running, what we have to do is add a listener to the window, listening for load, which means all of the scripts have load, and then we can access jQuery. So, which is why I break out all of these functions into their own separate sections. Keep this lean over here. So basically what we're saying is when the document's finished loading, jQuery is ready. Let's get a reference, a jQuery reference to the body. call this function up here to get all the sections that we need. Get rid of that console log. That was just for testing. Then I want to do a window. So we pass the window in as W in up here. When we do a on scroll, so whenever the user scrolls the page, we want to process every single section. So we're going to grab every section and we're going to run the jQuery each, and we're going to process that section with the element passed to it. So what that's going to do is it's going to call this method up here, which runs through and it works out which direction we're scrolling in. If we're scrolling up, then we want to look at the bottom of the element and see if that's within that range at the top there. If we're scrolling down, we want to look at the top of that element, see if that's within that range there. That's pretty much the jQuery side of it. That's a little bit complex to understand if you're not familiar with JavaScript or jQuery. That's my description of how that works. That's pretty much how all of this works. We do an F5 here. And once again, if we scroll through these, we can see that it changes on the way up, it changes on the way down. Whether it's a section, in this case, they're just spaces, it works. So it's a nice way of swapping colors and logos and whatever you want, depending on whatever class is set in that section. So yeah, so hopefully that is a helpful tutorial for somebody.